Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name, for those who don't already know, is Paul Lawrence, and I'd like to welcome you to another week where we have a conversation with people about things that matter to us. The name of the show, of course, is People Talk, and I've been your host for a number of weeks. And this week we have three guests who are going to be discussing a very pertinent topic for anybody who is from the Caribbean or has interest in the Caribbean, who loves the Caribbean, who's visited the Caribbean. But again, it is also linked back into the UK. But before I do that, I'm going to do my normal bit and piece where I have a conversation with you about a few bits and topics that have jumped up this weekend. You know what? No doubt this has been a momentous week. I think one of the problems with planning a show more or less a week in advance is that sometimes the thing that you think is the big topic can get overrun within a few days. So I was just listening enviously to Angela Marr, Curtis Walker, and Eddie Nestor talking about a whole range of things. And one of the topics they mentioned is something which is very close to me because A, I knew the guy, B, it's just down the road from where I live that it happened. And that's the shooting of the sergeant down in Croydon. Now, irrespective of whatever anybody else wants to say, any human being dying is not a good thing, and it's not something for us to celebrate. But this officer in particular is someone who I've actually met, and I've been a part of some of the work that he's done through a group called ANOS, led by a lady called Donna Murray Turner down here in Croydon. And you know what? A lot of people have a lot to say about the police, black policemen, white policemen, whatever you want to say. But there are actually some decent officers, and he was certainly one of those. So our condolences to his family, friends, and colleagues. However, the big topic for me this week, without any sort of, no sort of equal, has to be the outcome of the Breonna Taylor trial in the US. It's regrettable that I can say it did not surprise me. The outcome did not surprise me one little bit. I was in no way sort of expecting anything more. I'm of a generation who watched when a certain gentleman received 54 blows on TV, and that was the start of the Los Angeles riots back in the day. And the riots started not because of the blows, actually, but because of all three of the police officers involved were found not guilty. So call me jaded, call it whatever you want to do, but the reality of the matter is I'm now at a point where I no longer expect any semblance of justice within the Western courts for atrocities against black people. I've given up on that. I don't think about that anymore. So the Breonna Taylor verdict, though extremely disappointing and hurtful, it was not wholly unexpected from my side. And those are the things that, you know, really stood out for me this week. But why are we here today? We're here today to talk about a move by Barbados, a country which I'm yet to visit, by the way. I've had several invites, and I'm yet to visit. I'll take a smile of one of my guests to say that my invite is in the post. But they're moving towards becoming a republic, which essentially means removing the Queen as head of state. The current Prime Minister, who we fondly call Maya, is thinking about doing that for next year, and all the wheels are in motion. And just before we came online, I was having a quickie conversation with one of my guests, and I won't preempt too much of what we spoke about. But when I first posted that I was going to do this topic on my Facebook page, it was very, very clear that there's a duality in thinking between black people who have either grown up in the Caribbean or who live in the Caribbean, and black people who have been born and raised in the diaspora. And a lot of the comments that I saw, which, you know, we'll talk about, sort of reflected that duality and that difference in how we see things. And as I said to my guests, I haven't revealed yet what my stance is about the Queen or not the Queen, but I will later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce my guest. They will introduce themselves quickly. They won't do their preamble at this point. But as usual, we will introduce ourselves in the order in which they came on. For those of you who want to, you can find the Zoom details on my profile. So you're free to join the Zoom. You won't be able to speak until the first hour is over, and then you'll be able to speak, but just my 3 invited guests will be able to speak at the moment. So if the first gentleman, Alan, unmute yourself and introduce yourself, please. Say who you are and what makes you so uniquely qualified for this call. Take your time. There we go.
Okay. It kept telling me the host wants me to unmute, but it refused to unmute. Okay. Right. So I am Alan Springer, as Paul Lawrence has said. I was born in Barbados, spent much of my early life here, and then moved to the UK, where I spent most of my adult life, and now happily living back on my home island of Barbados. I am currently the shadow spokesperson for culture and the creative economy with the opposition party, People's Party for Democracy and Development. My working background is in the creative sector as a theatre writer and director, and I'm also a filmmaker, currently a filmmaker. That would do for starters.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'll go right away to my next guest. I think she's been on the show before. She's certainly sneaked into the chat before. She claims to be so busy, but thankfully she always seems to find time to do my show. So I'm not complaining at all. And Marilyn, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself again.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you again for the invitation. In terms of the context of this show, my parents are from Barbados. I was actually born here, so I am one of the, I guess I feel like I'm almost the second generation of the Windrush. My parents weren't quite as early as the Windrush generation. And one of the ways that I've been keeping in touch, and this is really thanks to a gentleman who is not here today on the show, Mr. Tyrone Roach, but if he's watching, thank you. For the past 6 years, I have chaired the annual Barbados Independence Day panel event at the Barbados High Commission in London, because we have a panel debate every single year, and Tyrone always comes up with something that is topical. So I've had the opportunity during that time to speak to people who were born and bred in Barbados, to speak to those who are what I call the matriarchal, the older generation. And what is lovely about that event is they always bring their children and their grandchildren along. So every year we get the opportunity to hear and take a pulse of what's going on for Bajans who are currently living in the United Kingdom. So that is a brief introduction in the context of today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. My third and final formal guest is a Jamaican, because you know what, anything I go on, yard is a fin of the place. But I thought it was important for me to bring a Jamaican in on this conversation, because the moment we heard and cheered, by the way, that reveals my position a bit, of the movements of Barbados, the inevitable question was asked. You know, there's a lot of talk about Jamaicans and our so-called rebellious nature, and yet it is Barbados who, to their credit, are leading the way in this movement. And so my third and final formal guest is Dr. Kevin Brown. Kevin?
Good afternoon, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. As Paul said, I'm Dr. Kevin Brown. I'm the chairman of the Jamaican Diaspora UK, which is a national organization that was established almost 15 years ago to protect the interests of Jamaicans living overseas in Britain. I'm also the UK North representative on the Global Jamaica Diaspora Council, which is an advisory forum established by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Jamaica, and it's actually chaired by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And we act as a sort of consultative group for the government of Jamaica. But you know, I'm also someone who believes in the Caribbean community, and you know, I follow CARICOM quite closely, And I'm happy to participate in this conversation because, you know, Jamaica is also on this journey of trying to retire the Queen as a head of state.
Well, first of all, let me just say very briefly, I did not know that. I didn't know that Jamaica was on that journey. So if you see me smiling more than I normally smile, you'll understand why. And look, that is my position. My position is that it is time. It is time for us as mature nations, Jamaica, Barbados, all the other colonies or former colonies, as I like to think of it. I think it is time for us to move on. And I think there's certainly been in the last couple of years certain actions which tell me quite directly that we're not being served by this membership of this elite club, if they want to call it that. But I want to ask Alan. Alan, give us. I know you have some thoughts on this, so take the podium. Say your piece, please.
Okay, here we go. I'm not sure I like being first to go, but I'll run it.
Barbados is first to go, so go for it.
Well, not really, because Trinidad, Guyana, and Dominica's already gone there, so we're not actually the first. But let's go. I like what Dr. Kevin Brown said in describing it as a journey, because it is indeed a journey. And describing it as a journey, we therefore have to think about, is it time? When does the journey come to an end that satisfies what we need? And that's the discourse really that we all the islands need to be having. I want to begin by casting our minds back just to, before I do that, I want to say this. There's no such thing as Barbados has decided to become a republic. There's no such thing as well done Barbados. And the reason I'm saying that is because Barbados has not been given the opportunity to make any such decision. And I want to say this very, very strongly. The Barbados government, the BLP, nor its PM, Mayor Motley, is not Barbados. There are 280,000 Barbadians living in Barbados. And none of them, apart from government, and really apart from PM Mayor Motley, has had any say on the matter thus far. So I refute the idea that Barbados has spoken. It hasn't. And I want to cast our minds back to the 23rd, I think it was the 23rd of June 2016. I'm sure all of you living in the UK will remember that day when the UK went to referendum over the question of what I can call perhaps the issue of independent sovereignty for the UK. And I think we need to look at that for a moment. The UK went to referendum and made a decision. However, in the light of that decision, I think 3 years down the line, if you ask some of those people who voted to leave, whether they still wanted to leave, there would have been a lot of revision of that decision. And the reason for that is because when UK went to referendum, most of the people voting had no idea what Brexit really meant. So there are two issues there for me. One is that Barbados is not thus far determined to go to referendum over the issue of going republic. And secondly, if or when there's enough pressure put on current government to take this to referendum, which would be the right course to go, even before the referendum, there needs to be a process of education and information. Because I have done a very short poll, if you like, amongst friends and acquaintances. And a lot of people in Barbados don't even understand what a referendum is, never mind what a republic is. And we can't go republic unless Barbados knows what that means for Barbados. So I think before we start jumping up and down and saying it is time, no, it is not time. The journey has started, but this is not a journey that can end in 14 months, which is the time scale that the PM has unilaterally decided will be when we go to becoming a republic. So in my opening remarks, and there's a lot more to come, but in my opening remarks, I believe we have to stop saying that Barbados has decided, because Barbados has not decided. Prime Minister Mia Mottley has decided.
Wonderful. You know, this is exactly why I do this show, for no other reason but to get proper lineup, because again, I'm not overly familiar with everything going on in Barbados, so that was very good to know. And I think a quick question to you, Alan, before we go to our other guests: is a referendum constitutionally required?
To make such a decision? No, to my understanding, it's not constitutionally required, but the Constitution does make stipulations for matters of important national significance, that the people should be party to that decision. So it's not required, but it's certainly referenced, not in terms of the wording of referendum, but certainly the substance of the process that should happen is indicated.
So let me get to a straight question, and then I'm going to come to Marilyn. What would your preferred outcome for such a referendum be?
My preferred outcome, let's go to my last paragraph of what I was going to say. Everything I'm going to say over the course of the next hour might lead people to believe that I'm dead set against Barbados going to a republic. Nothing could be further from the truth. I long for the day when Barbados break free of all those ties of colonialism. But I believe in process. And I believe that the outcome has to match that process. So yeah, I am pro going republic, but I'm also pro a process that involves Barbadians. And I think if we went to a referendum now and the vote was yes, I would not be happy if the time scale is the one that has been proposed. If we went to referendum now and there was a recognition that is a journey to take place, and that journey is not that short time span, I would be happy with that. So if we went to referendum, I don't think the question should just be about the issue of whether Barbados should become a republic, but in part of that referendum should be about time scale as well, and the process that should take place.
Marilyn, unmute yourself and tell us your opening bits and pieces on this matter.
Well, I think I'm going to reiterate what I said to you when you phoned me up this week and explained about the premise of the show. Not that bit, the other bit. No, I'm joking. But what I said to you is, I don't have enough information at the moment. It's not come out of nowhere, because this was alluded to by Errol Barrow. There was some research done 1998 to the year 2000, so that is still in place and can be referred back to. But when I heard the news, a bit like Alan, I was like, I can't yet jump up and down, because I have no idea. What does that mean politically? What does it mean economically? What does it mean for the future of Barbados? What does it actually mean in practical terms? How does that impact the day-to-day lives of Bajans? How does that impact the overall economy as you're moving forwards? And there is not enough information at the moment. Now, with any subject, take any subject, type that into what I call Guru Google. You can't even put in the first 3 or 4 letters of what you're typing. Google will finish your sentence for you. When I started researching, what does it mean to remove the Queen as head of state? What impact does that have on the economy? What impact does that have on the political system? How long does it take to undo and unravel that relationship? I was coming up with nothing. And I had to go, normally on the Google, on Google, you only need the first page of Google to do your research. I was having to go 9, 10 pages deep to find anything. And then when I started, let's say, looking at Trinidad and Tobago, I'm like, well, okay, they've got a different economic base than Barbados, because they have petrochemicals. We do not have those kinds of reserves in Barbados. So it's a different proposition already. Looked at Guyana, who, if you lined the Caribbean islands up, even though Barbados was always called the small island when I was growing up, they're a very wealthy island. They're one of the wealthiest Caribbean islands. And a lot of it is predicated on tourism. And I have no idea how much of that tourism is secured on the idea that the Queen is the head of state. So I can't at this moment be definitive in any statement, which is probably a little bit of annoying for a debate, because it's nice to go one way or the other, because I have not got enough information. Now, coming back to the thing about the referendum, from what I have heard Prime Minister Motley say, she does not believe that is necessary in this case, because she has also referred back to the work that was done 20 years ago. They also hold the majority in terms of Parliament. They need a 2/3 decision majority to move this forward. And as Alan has already said, if people don't even understand what referendum, no, not people, let's just say there will be a pocket of people who don't understand what a referendum even means, how can you even be asking them those questions? If when you say yes or no, well, yes or no to what? Yes or no to my economy? Yes or no to how? They don't even know what they would be voting on. So to go to referendum, you could find yourself in the situation that we find ourselves here now in Brexit, where people voted, I believe, with misinformation and disinformation and not enough information, and get an outcome that serves no one. So for me, I'm like, I need more information. I need more information. What does this mean for the future of Barbados? And what does it really mean to leave those colonial chains and shackles and ties behind? So that is where I'm sitting at the moment. You know, I've been looking at, you know, some of the economics and some of the political factors. I can kind of work some of that out. And of course, the Queen isn't involved in the day-to-day running of Barbados, but nonetheless, there are implications. So personally, I want to just see more about the implications. Do I think it's a good idea for them to complete the journey that they started in 1966? Yes. Do I want them to rush the journey when people don't understand what it means? No. So that's where I'm sitting at the moment.
Okay, good, because I was going to actually press you for a where you stand. Kevin, I don't know what to ask you at this point, but what's your feeling? You pointed out that Jamaica is on this journey. To be honest, I wasn't aware that we were on the journey at all. I know that when the current Prime Minister did come into power, he did make a statement about following through on the proprietary work that was done by the former Prime Minister Portia Simpson, but it's not something we've heard anything more of. I know that in the chat where I posted that comment and that point, someone who I know is an ardent supporter of that Prime Minister was shocked and said she'd go check the manifesto. But we all know that manifestos mean nothing. What's your opening statement on this, Kevin?
Well, as I said earlier, Paul, it is a journey. So you mentioned Portia Simpson Miller, but even before Portia Simpson Miller, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, spoke about removing the Queen as head of state, other prime ministers have also expressed the same sentiment. And I guess the most recent one was in 2016, where the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, actually put it in the throne speech. So it was meant to be part of their legislative program. But after 4.5 years, it never happened. And now it's back on the agenda as well. So in terms of the politicians, it's been a can that they've been kicking down the road for some time. The other thing as well I would say is that, and I guess it goes back to the point Marilyn was saying about and Alan about the people of Barbados, because it's one thing for the political class to speak on this matter of removing the Queen, but it's another thing in terms of how does the rest, how do ordinary Jamaicans feel about it. And that it's been quite a telling journey because in 2011, there was a survey of Jamaicans on the matter of how they felt about Jamaica being independent. And to my surprise, 60% of respondents felt that Jamaica would have been better remaining British. That was in 2011. 2011. Remember, no, we got independence in 1962. So up to 2011, some Jamaicans still felt 60%, according to this poll, that we would have been better being colonized, right? Now, the most recent poll, which was done, I think, this year, just prior to the elections, when the question was posed to as to whether we should remove the Queen, 55% of Jamaicans agreed that it's time for the Queen to be retired as head of state. 30% said no, and the other 20% didn't know. So it tells you that it's not a straightforward matter. There's no clear unanimous position on whether we should remove the Queen, and that tells you something about the journey we're on in terms of true independence and understanding what it means. Because Marilyn, her hesitation to commit, I think, is a reflection of what other people probably are concerned about in terms of, well, if you remove the Queen, what are the implications for the economy and other factors as well in terms of our trade and so on. As far as I understand it, there shouldn't be any impact because the Queen is pretty much symbolic. But I think that if we are going to classify ourselves as truly sovereign nations, and I'm speaking in the Jamaican context, you cannot declare yourself sovereign and independent when your head of state, your official head of state, is the British Queen. And furthermore, this is not just about removing the Queen. A whole host of constitutional reform is required in Jamaica because our final court of appeal is also in the London Privy Council, right? So we had emancipation. So Britain colonized Jamaica from 1655, right? And they enslaved African people, our ancestors, right up until the mid-19th century. We had emancipation, so the chains were removed, but then we went into this so-called independence in the 1960s. And in my opinion, we need to complete this independence project. And part of completing that independence project is to retire the Queen as head of state. The Jamaica should become a republic. We need to discuss what that republic governance structure would look like, but we need to do that. And we need to also remove the Privy Council as the final court of appeal and adopt the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, how have we been doing when we've attempted to do this? The two major political parties in Jamaica are divided on how to go about it. So the PNP, the People's National Party, believes that just like Mia Mottley in Barbados, you do not need a referendum. To remove the Queen, you should do it through Parliament. And as you said, you need a 2/3 majority to do that. Whereas the ruling Jamaica Labour Party believe that you need a referendum and you need to put it to the people of Jamaica. The problem with the challenge I find with the Jamaica Labour Party's proposition is that they want to have what they're calling a grand referendum where they're going to put not just the retirement of the Queen as head of state to the Jamaican people, but a whole raft of other things. So it's going to be a grand referendum with multiple themes, and how Jamaicans are going to go through trying to decide what to pick for each topic is beyond me. But the government seems to think it's a good idea to have this grand referendum and put several topics to the Jamaican people to decide, including the Queen. So that's what the ruling JLP, Jamaica Labour Party, proposed. And if they are to be held to their word, we can expect a referendum over the next 5 years that they'll be in power. And we will see how that turns out. But clearly, for me, Paul, it's fundamental that we've removed the chains, but in terms of mental enslavement, we are not quite there yet. If Jamaicans can say in 2011 that they'd have preferred, 60% of them can say that they'd have preferred to be British, then it tells you a lot about how far we have to go in terms of mental, or relieving ourselves of the sort of mental enslavement and truly believing in us being the drivers of our destiny, right? So, we wait to see, but we've been promised this before, Paul, and I don't know if it will happen over the next 5 years.
Alan, I want to ask you a quick question, Alan, because I want to ask you the same question which Kevin just answered on behalf of Jamaica. What's your feeling, your gut feeling? You're on the ground, you live there, you used to live in the UK, you've returned to Barbados, which is your home country. What's your feeling? Do you feel that if Barbadians were asked that question, do you think the outcome would reflect what Kevin has just expressed? In terms of, 60% of Jamaicans in 2011, and I know 2011 was almost 10 years ago, but you know what, it's not that far in the scheme of things. But do you think that would probably be the same sort of outcome?
I don't think so, not in terms, and you're asking for gut feeling. And my gut feeling is that Barbadians are not too concerned about whether they're British or not. So and that's because until fairly recently, in Caribbean terms, Barbadians have led a pretty good quality of life. So the pressures about whether being British holds us back or not may not be the same as in other Caribbean islands.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But could it be that they think being British pushes them forward rather than holding them back?
That's why I said the pressures would be different. It could well be that Barbadians, or a group of Barbadians, and quite a significant group of Barbadians, actually believe that staying in the Commonwealth has actually helped us to achieve what we have achieved. There are Barbadians who will believe that. Some won't. So I think we won't have as clear cut a picture as we had in Jamaica. And I suspect that the leanings would be more towards, well, here, we've done really well as a Commonwealth nation. What's the point of leaving? Is what we're going to put in place actually going to serve us better than being in the Commonwealth has already served us? I think that would be an issue for Barbadians. But let me say this, in terms of making the change, a lot of the changes that Kevin outlined, we have the constitutional right to make those changes now, and we haven't. For example, we have a statue of Lord Nelson sitting in the middle of Independence Square, of Hero Square, here in Barbados. And successive governments have rejected a loud voice in Barbados to remove that statue. Now we can remove that. We have names of streets like Cavan's Lane in the center of Bridgetown. Now James Cavan was one of the biggest slavers in history, and Cavan's Lane is actually where all the slaves were auctioned and so on. We've made no attempt to change that street name. I'm saying this because I'm saying there are things that are more important to change than the ceremonial removal of the Queen as head. The Queen as head of state has really no impact on Barbados at the moment. It's largely a ceremonial thing, but there are practical things that we hang on to as a Commonwealth nation that we have the right to remove here and now that we haven't actually dealt with. So what I'm saying is that there are things more pressing and more important for Barbados as a state to begin to break those colonial ties than to go republic. Going republic is largely an ideological thing. It has very little practical impact on Barbadians on the street. So what I'm saying is the journey needs to continue while we put certain things in place. And I think the move towards a republic will happen almost naturally when we remove the vestiges of colonialism that we hang on to, that we have no need or that we don't have to hang on to, that we can remove at a snap of the finger, but we hang on to them. So why are we getting involved with this debate about becoming a republic while hanging on to the very vestiges of colonialism that we could actually remove? So I think we need to have that. We need to have that debate.
Let me ask you a question, Alan. Alan, I want to ask you a question. You're right. There are several things that they could be doing now that would help to dismantle that link back to colonialism. Practically. Yeah. Why do you think those things are not being done, but the ceremonial, and you're right, you're absolutely right, because this is how I argued in terms of Jamaica as well, in terms of, we don't care about the Queen. It means nothing to us day to day, on a day-to-day. Why do you think that that's the route that heads of states are going? For example, your current prime minister. Why is that the route? When you're right, there are practical things that could be done.
Well, my personal feeling and my political feeling is that, look, we have a ruling class in Barbados who is as colonial as the vestiges of colonialism that we want to remove. You know, our prime minister was educated at the LSE. We have ministers and so on who went down the Oxbridge route. They are as colonial as anybody else. So while on the one hand, we can talk about going republic, we have to address the issue of the colonial class that leads the Caribbean islands. And to me, again, that is far more pressing than going republic. So I have to really begin to look at why is it, and I can only use Mayor Motley as an example, why is it that Mayor Motley at this time is talking about going republic? I think that's a question that needs to be asked. If I can just quote the Information Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Melford Nicholas. He said, although Antigua and Bermuda will likely examine the possibility of becoming a republic in the future, now is not the time. I don't know that there's an appetite in this nation for that at this time. I believe we should remain focused on the task at hand. For example, the rekindling of the national economy that the country enjoyed prior to COVID-19 pandemic. So there's another thing we need to introduce. You know, Bob and Marilyn touched on it. The issue of tourism in Barbados is decimated. And tourism is by and large our main economic provider. Now, all our energies and focus should be on economic recovery. And if it is to be down the road of tourism, we have to do everything we can to recover the tourism industry. Will going republic at this time affect that? I suspect it will. The UK is one of our biggest tourist markets, probably the biggest. Will all those tourists who come to Barbados as part of the Commonwealth be so inclined to do if Barbados is a republic? That's a question that needs to be asked. So what I'm saying is there's pragmatic issues that we need to address over and above the national idealism of becoming a republic. Is becoming a republic for Barbados at this time the best for an independent island state as we are? We have to consider that. And that's not to say that I'm against becoming a republic, but I'm saying that there are a lot of inputs to that journey that have not been made, and therefore we can't at this time have a time frame on becoming a republic unless there's a hidden agenda. And I have to tell you this, we have a PM who is given to tinkering, has a hankering for tinkering with the Constitution. Now, becoming a republic will give far more constitutional powers on government to rewrite the Constitution to suit themselves. There's a political issue in Barbados about how we're being governed at the moment, and this move towards becoming a republic is very much part of the way Barbados is being governed at the moment. And while we can talk about whether there's a need to go to referendum, the issue is not about whether there's a need, the issue is about whether or not it is a right thing to do. And it is the right thing. The job of government is to represent its people. It is the right thing to know what you're representing on behalf of the people. And you can only do that on such a great matter of national significance by asking the people what they want to do. And as myself and Marilyn has pointed out, you can't just ask them if they don't understand equitably the issues. So you have to engage in a process of education. If you really care about the nation, you have to engage in a process of education which allows the people to understand what you're talking about and is therefore able to make an informed choice about what we as a nation should do. Unless we do that, we're doing the nation a disservice. And I'll tell you right now, that's precisely what we're doing. We're doing the nation a disservice by introducing this. And Marilyn said it's not out of the blue because of the work we did in 1998 to 2000. But it is out of the blue if a government comes in and 2.5 years in power, they say nothing about it, and all of a sudden, boom, they drop it on us. That is out of the blue, and that shouldn't happen. So especially in a throne speech,
I can see.
let me just finish with the throne speech at the moment. The throne speech is an instrument of uniting a nation. This has divided the nation. It should never have been introduced in the throne speech. And there were other issues introduced in that throne speech which had no place in a throne speech. But certainly the issue of a referendum, of a going republic, has no place in the throne speech whatsoever. I'll stop.
Kevin.
Yes. I just want to respond to Alan because
I'm going to say this, be brief.
Yeah, man, I'll be very brief. Yes. So I'll get straight into it. Alan, you brought up some interesting points, and I've heard them before, that we have other priorities, the economy and so on. Look, the economy is going nowhere, and the economy will and shall remain the priority of Caribbean governments, right? My question to African Caribbean people is this: are we going to be a people who choose to walk on our knees or stand upright as men and women? That's the choice. You cannot be an independent nation. Let me show you how ridiculous the situation is, Alan, in Jamaica. Our head of state is the British Queen. Since 2006, Jamaicans require a visa to visit Britain, meaning that you cannot even freely visit the country that your head of state resides. Are we going to be a people who walk on our knees, Alan, or walk on our feet as men and women? It's about our mind and being proud of being independent. The economic impact, in my opinion, Alan and Marlene, will be limited, because right now, as I think we can all agree, that it's symbolic. But here's the thing: symbols matter, right? The symbol. What is the symbolic damage of Jamaicans continuing to have their former colonizer as head of state? If we either have to decide, do we want freedom or remain slaves? We are not in chains physically, but in our minds. We have to free our minds. Don't tell me about the economy being a priority. I want freedom in its absolute. Because I am sure if you spoke to an American, they would find it quite strange. Because for Americans, freedom for them is very clear. And we must have that clarity in terms of independence. And getting rid of the Queen is part of the process. It's a constitutional package. We want our own Caribbean Court of Justice. We want our own heads of state, because we must believe in our ability to lead ourselves, cost it what it may. Freedom at whatever the price may be, Alan. Let us pay it and be free. Because in Jamaica, there are people who were killed. Paul Bogle, Sam Sharp, they were hanged because they were fighting for freedom. We cannot do a disservice to our ancestors by arguing that, well, oh, we need to protect tourism, we need to protect the economy, and so on. And also the whole idea that this is being politicized in Barbados. I don't know the Barbados political situation, but let us look at the broader picture and of just completing this independence project and walking as men and women in this globe. And truly being sovereign.
I want to take us down. I want to take hold on.
Okay,
I want to take us down something which is connected to what Kevin has just said, and is connected to what you have said, Alan.
Mm-hmm.
It has occurred to me that what Kevin has just said, and I've known Kevin for a little while, and that is very much the mindset of those who reside in the diaspora. So those who reside in the diaspora, like myself, like Kevin, we struggle. We struggle with the ongoing acceptance of the Queen as the head of state of our countries. And for us, I can't add to how Kevin expressed it. Yeah, it is a mental thing. One of the very first comments in the chat on Zoom that Anthony Yearwood put up was a very stark thing. He said, every child should grow up knowing that they can become the head of state of their country. And, for me, that's a very pointed and very rational comment. And even here in England, the truth of the matter is the movements for England to become a republic have been more or less suppressed by the upper classes because that would remove a lot of their privilege. But English children cannot grow up thinking they can become head of state because they're not a part of the right family. We have an opportunity as countries who, and again, Kevin's words are just ringing in my ears, who are claiming to be on this journey to remove the shackles that come all the way back from slavery. And the statutes you talked about, the road names, the whole link. Surely, Alan, we can acknowledge that the two things can be done at the same time. Yes, we can still look after our economy. And yes, we can still look after our tourism. And yes, we can do all of these things. My understanding is that Barbados has lovely beaches, wonderful facilities. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think the attraction to come to Barbados, I don't think the attraction to invest in Barbados will change if we remove the Queen as head of state. What's your response, Alan?
Okay, my response is this. Look, we keep talking about journey, and yet you said, can the two things happen at the same time? The two journeys can happen at the same time, and the two journeys are in fact happening at the same time. We are on a journey towards becoming a republic. There's no doubt about it. However, it is the time span and the process that I keep talking about. And when we say we can't keep talking about economic recovery and protecting tourism, that's not the end plan. The end plan is to protect the people. What is right for the people, not what is right for tourism, or not what is right for the economy. It is right for what is right for the people at this moment in time. There is a saying that there is no right time, and that's true. But I'll tell you what, there is a wrong time, and we have to consider when is the wrong time, not when is the right time, because there's never a right time, so you might as well do it now, some might say. But there is a wrong time, and we need to consider if that wrong time applies to Barbados now. And I want to come back to something Kevin said, which is crucial. There's a tension in the Caribbean about whether we are independent islands or whether we are CARICOM, for want of a better word, whether we are a group of nations. And for me, the pressing need in the Caribbean, in terms of when we become republic, wouldn't it be great if Caribbean nations becoming republic became republic as part of a united and a unified CARICOM? Now, to me, more important than talking about becoming a republic is about talking about how we can make CARICOM work for us as independent islands as part of a united unit. That's far more important to me and far more beneficial to the people. And what I'm concerned with is what is beneficial to the people, not what is beneficial to ideologists who want to cast the Queen in the careenage, cast in the careenage, and then what? What difference does it make to Barbadians on the street? The point is, I think CARICOM needs to become the #1 item on the Caribbean agenda, over and above any Caribbean island talking about becoming a republic. Because when we have a united CARICOM, we will just not be part of the Commonwealth. We will be part of a CARICOM that is a force, not just in the region, but is a force across the Americas and beyond. And to me, that's the pressing issue. So in answer to your question, to the two things happen at the same time? Yes, they can, because they're part of two journeys which can happen at the same time. The real issue is about what are our priorities on behalf of the people. And I can't talk about Jamaica. I can only talk about Barbados at this moment in time. If I talk about Jamaica, then I have to talk about CARICOM. I can't widen my discussion to talk beyond Barbados to talk about another Caribbean island. As soon as you bring into another Caribbean island into the dialogue, for me, we're talking CARICOM and all the other Caribbean nations. And what is most important for all the Caribbean regions in this region is to have a viable, forceful, productive CARICOM. And if we want to talk about the nations, that's the context in which we need to talk about it, not in the context of becoming a republic.
Marilyn, quick question for you. I hate to put this on you, but I'm going to put it on you anyway. You're a big girl, you can handle this. Is there an element of fear behind the question of too fast, need more information? Is it a matter of fear? Is it, one of the guys expressed in my chat yesterday, and though he was referring to Jamaica, I'm sure it sort of goes to any of the islands or any other countries considered. How much do we actually benefit? Do we benefit from this tie to this lady, in Buckingham Palace? What do we benefit? Are we fearful of losing something? Is there something that's holding us back? That in the back of our heads, we're thinking, we have to have what Anthony refers to as the long argument, the big conversation. Let's have a 4-year, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. Are we fearful of breaking that final shackle?
Well, for me, there are a number of facets. For example, the Carry Forum agreement has already been signed. That comes into process in January 2021, when we are supposed to be leaving Brexit. The bilateral treaties have already been signed as well. They will remain part of the Commonwealth. So in that procedural thing, that all remains exactly the same. The question about fear is an interesting one. It could potentially be, now this is theoretical, but does having the Queen as head of state mean that people from the United Kingdom and other countries around the world feel more comfortable traveling to Barbados? Because it almost, it was known as Little England when I was growing up. I don't know that a study has ever been done on the psychology of that, but if I just take it into, let me just take it into social media terms, if we bring it right up to date, you know that if you have an influencer that mentions you, that retweets your photograph, etc., you're going to now have a massive following that suddenly gets associated to you, and they're going to know, like, and trust you more because this influencer has now said, I'm associated with this. So I guess, even though that might not be where people are consciously thinking, I'm guessing there will be a bit of that. Now, one of the first questions I posed when I sat down yesterday to just kind of think about the issues and where are we at and what are the implications, the first thing I wrote on the bit of paper was, who do they want to be known as? Because there was a part of that speech that says we're making the ultimate statement of confidence in who we are and what we are capable of achieving. And if I was starting a process with a coaching client or a corporate training client, we normally start with the big why, the purpose, what's our end goal, what's our end game, and how do we want to be seen and perceived? And that is the thing that is going to need to be instilled into the minds of Bajans in terms of, this is what we are going for. Because when you know who you want to be, how you want to be perceived, you can then start working towards that. But just to pull the rug and then go, good luck, that in itself, fear of change, fear of the unknown, all of these are very real things. All of us around the world are living this with the pandemic at the moment. So the short answer to your question is yes, there is likely to be an element of fear. Is that conscious at the moment? Probably not. But I do believe there's an element of that. But I think a big piece of this is, okay, who do you want to be known as now? And it may be you just continue, because even though I was bullied at school, Little Island, all that sort of stuff, Barbados is powerful. Barbados is leading the way in so many areas. Barbados is an incredible island. They are punching well above their weight. And I would love that they would continue to do that and do it with strategy. And, Alan was saying about the timescale. The timescale could be a political timescale in that there's, let's just say 2 years left. So if you're going to do this thing, you've got to do it now, and you're going to do it fast, and you've got to do it quick. But I would love it to be that this decision is based on that statement in terms of Barbados has achieved so much and can achieve so much more. And if it's going to go down this route, I want that to be the driving force. And then that gets instilled into the minds of Bajans. And they will then, because Bajans are very proud, they like education, they are very well educated. Seriously, they are so capable in
You didn't need to say seriously. We're no one's doubt.
So they can do it, but for me, I want more process. I want more strategy. I want more clarity. What is that, and how do we now bring people with them so that the fear doesn't have a time to set in, because we know where we're going, we know what we're doing, there's this, and this is why we are doing it, and this is where we're heading. And because that's missing, I think fear is potentially the next thing that can start arising when the dust has settled and people have gone, oh, so that's happening, is it? So yes, I think there'll be an element of fear.
I think as I've listened to all the contributions, one of the things that has certainly occurred to me, which I think, I don't know if Alan is being too polite, but he's almost said it. And I'm going to say it because no one pays my salary. I'm getting the feeling that the urgency of this current sprint is political. I think the current Prime Minister, Maya Malta, is well loved. I personally think she's a stand-up person in terms of the things that I have seen. I don't live there, so I'm not directly affected by those things. So it's easy for me to say, but I've certainly appreciated her stance on things. But I do feel, listening to someone like Alan, and Alan has declared himself as an opposition person anyway, but that's fine. I do think there may be some politically, because very much when you reference Brexit, Marilyn, one of the things that I have learned is that a lot of prime ministers, politicians, they like to do big things. They like to do a thing which is their thing. And they like to do a thing which they can say, well, I went down in history as the person who did this. And overnight, as I thought about the topic, maybe I'm being disingenuous to the PM, but I felt that, and I think that feeling has been strengthened by the very rational concept about educating people about the change. I live in the UK, so I can't avoid remembering the catastrophe that was Brexit, in terms of how ill-informed people made an ill-informed choice. I don't care who disagrees. It was an ill-informed choice. And that was based on ignorance. That was based on a lack of knowledge. And that was based upon somebody pushing a political agenda and waving the flag of sovereignty as the prize that people would attain by moving it. And so I wonder if we're seeing it to be the political play, because what I'm hearing from Alan, from Marilyn, is that there's no opposition to sovereignty. That it's obviously a great thing. It's something that they both agree with, and I think, but it's the process. And Kevin, I want to ask you this question. You've made yourself very clear in terms of grasp the moment, grasp it now. Do we lose anything? Do we gain anything aside from that sense of pride? Because I know the sense of pride is a big thing in your head, and I know that you're going to reach for it at the same time. But what do we lose removing the Queen? And I'm trying to do this without the emotional side of the argument. Yeah, because one of the first responses to my post yesterday about this topic was, Jamaica already because we're broke. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Financially, we can't. And my comeback was, well, what does Britain actually contribute financially that they wouldn't still contribute?
Absolutely, and that's the key point, right? Because I've heard Marilyn and Alan speak about perhaps an impact on tourism. I would say that most tourists don't even realize that the Queen is head of state in Jamaica or Barbados. That doesn't influence their travel plans whatsoever. And so I don't think that tourism will be impacted. Likewise, more generally, I don't think having the head of the Queen as head of state has been influential in terms of how we interact with Britain. It tends to be a government to government discussion rather than a government to the Queen discussion in terms of our political relationship with Britain. So I don't think that there's anything to lose, but there's everything to gain, in my opinion. There's a lot to gain in terms of being truly independent. And that's what this is all about. And can I just say, Paul, that we're speaking about the Queen, but I have to repeat that it should be a range of constitutional reform, including in Jamaica's case, removing the Privy Council as our final court of appeal. Why should we have our final court of appeal in another person's country? Right? Again, another ridiculous notion. I mean, just imagine you have to appeal to a court here, and if you want to come here to handle your appeal, you have to apply for a visa. It's nonsense. And I'm saying, as African heritage people, we need to finish away with this nonsense. The fear is in our mind. The fear is in our mind. We have to free our minds. And here's the thing, Paul. I grew up in Jamaica. I went through the Jamaican education system. And the fact that 30% of Jamaicans are saying that we should keep the Queen points to a failure of the Jamaican education system. Because the Jamaican education system has not decolonized our minds. The Jamaican education system, Paul, has taught us maths and English, but has not freed us, right? I went to school in Jamaica being taught that Christopher Columbus discovered Jamaica in 1494. We were colonized in 1655 by Britain. There was nothing empowering about the Jamaican education system. I was not taught Garveyism in its truest sense, right? And I was not taught African history in its truest sense. And this is why Jamaican people still feel ashamed of their skin color. We have a bleaching epidemic in Jamaica, right? Because our minds, Paul, are in chains and our political leaders fail us, right? So when you talk about the Queen being head of state as symbolic, it's an important symbolism because it still says Massa is in charge. And in 2020, how can that be, Paul? I am ashamed as a Jamaican to say that. My head of state is in a country and I need a visa to visit that country. How shameful is that? And we think that, oh, well, you know, we can't do that because the economy or whatever. Freedom is everything, Paul. Everything. Freedom. And for that freedom, some of us died. And here we are, uncertain, unsure about something that should be straightforward. Should have been done from 1962. Should have been a criteria for the British flag coming down. Right? And Trinidad has taken that step. I don't see Trinidad struggling. Right? Guyana has taken that step. I don't see Guyana struggling. And they did it in the 70s. What are we waiting for? Freedom is everything, Paul. Everything. The statues, take them down. Christopher Columbus statue is in Sentence Bay. Should have been in a museum long time ago. Christopher Columbus triggered genocide in Jamaica. And we have a statue. We have a statue, Paul, of someone who was involved in genocide. Where are the Thanos?
We have a whole town. We have a whole town called Discovery Bay.
Absolutely. Right?
That's as ludicrous as you can get. You know, we have a place called Discovery Bay. But look, guys.
You're repeating my argument in as much as that's what I said. Why aren't we dealing with those things when we can deal with them simply? Why aren't we? And to me, there are more of a priority. Let's deal with the practical things on the ground that we can actually deal with.
And all of them have to be tackled.
Agreed.
It's not a pecking order.
And that's why it's a
guys, I want to bring in some of the people who have been patiently and some not so patiently waiting in the Zoom chat. For those of you who are in the Zoom chat who would like to have a comment, just remember that today's Rice and Peas Day, so we're not going on forever. I have just given you all the ability to unmute yourselves. Do not unmute yourself and shout. If you have a question for one of the gentlemen or the lady, just raise your hand, unmute yourself, and I will call you for your question. While you're figuring out how to unmute yourself, Kevin, I hear you. I went to school in Jamaica, and I remember when I was 24 years old, and I said to my mom, look, I think I want to leave Jamaica. Had nothing to do with several parishes that I weren't allowed to visit. And she said, well, you know, you could go to the US, you could go to England. And I said, well, you know, America. She said, no. You need to go to the motherland. You'll be fine there. Yeah. And that same sort of view is an education thing. It is how we were taught to think of England. It is how we were taught to view it. And it wasn't until I came here, and I'm writing a piece right now for my office about my experience of racism in the UK, which is connected in a way that I suddenly realized that there was no benevolent friend in England. It's not been a relationship of equals. It's never been a relationship of equals. And the hypocrisy of the visa situation, and most recently, Windrush. If nothing else informed us that them not like we, and we not like them, Windrush has got to be the thing. And I you know what? I like to be balanced, but I agree with all three of you. I believe that there's a process that needs to begin now to decouple us, but I also feel that there are actions that they should be taking now as well. You know, I grew up in Spanish Town, which is the former Spanish colonial home in Jamaica, when the Spaniards ruled, and that entire square is a disgrace. It should have been removed a long time ago if we call ourselves clear. As I said, we have places like Little England. We have places like, you name a town in England, we have it in Jamaica. Yeah. When we talk about stuff like Discovery Bay, we have a plaque commemorating Columbus turning up in our country as if it was some sort of a heroic act, when all it did was heralding centuries of oppression. But that's enough preaching from me. Is there anybody in the chat? Ray, you want to undo yourself? Sorry, guys, I can actually see Ray, so you can raise your hand electronically so I can know you want to speak. Ray Jones, please. What do you have to say, sir?
I've enjoyed the debate. I suppose my question or my statement is really around, I don't understand the reticence. Every now and again, there's an opportunity for us to, and I like Kevin's thoughts about mental freedom. And you have to take a leap. And part of that leap is, and I think Brexit is a really good example, where you keep a lot of noise about what you think it will be. And it's not until you start the journey that you actually figure it out. So there's a piece of me that's actually saying, where is the courage to take the journey? And almost like sometimes you just have to believe. I think that's one part. I think there's also about, I'd be really interested in your guests' views on, if we were a republic, what might Marilyn's vision look like? What could this freedom look like? I love some of the stuff I was reading recently about the relationship with Ghana in terms of the nurses. How could we turn to, what would a future look like, a closer relationship with Africa, diaspora? How would we be connected? So I think there's something about, rather than waiting for a politician to tell you what it might look like, what do we want? And how might we go about making that real?
So, Marilyn, let me ask you a question. When we talk about and quite rightly so, when we talk about education, yeah, because that's come up. Both Alan, Marilyn, Kevin, we've all used this phrase about education. Is there a role for people in the diaspora in terms of educating our home nations, in terms of, there does always seem to be this gap in how we view things as people who are either raised there or still live there, and people. Is there a role to be played? What role should the diaspora be playing in this?
Now, I'm going to start with education in its purest sense, first of all. Now, I had an awakening about the Barbados education system when my younger sister was 11. She left here, went back to live in Barbados. She was 2 years, now, let's just say she's in her third year. When she got to Barbados, they were on the equivalent of 6th year education. So she was 2 years behind in her knowledge, and she's a very bright girl. She's one of the cleverest people I know. So there's no comparison here. The educational system in Barbados is amazing. Now, I'm going to answer the other side of what I think you're saying with regards to education. A few months ago, when what happened with George Floyd came about, I ran a webinar about healing ancestral trauma. The reason I ran that webinar is because just after 10 minutes online, I was seeing things, people saying they're feeling the pain, they're hurt, they're broken, they're heavy, they're angry. Seriously, it was an onslaught. And I actually put all of those words onto one page and made a montage of it. And I'm like, I can't sit here and watch this and be hearing this over and over and over again, that people are being traumatized and re-traumatized every time they switch on the TV or look at social media. So in terms of what education means to me in the context of this conversation, it actually means, and Mia Motley has actually said that. She has said it in Parliament, she has said it on interviews. I guess the word you might use is repatriations if you look at it from a financial point of view, but part of what she was also saying is about healing the past, and part of it will be what both Kevin and Alan were talking about in terms of the statues and the names and the being reminded of that past. But I think, I wouldn't actually use the word education. I would call this one, you know, healing the trauma, if I had to kind of put some description around it, because there's a lot of baggage that comes with this whole conversation that we're talking about. And just to answer what Ray Jones was saying, my vision, if I had to choose two words, continued excellence. Barbados excels in everything that it puts its mind to. So part of the vision that I would hold for the island is continued excellence, leading the way, being a trailblazer. Mia Motley recently came out with the 12-month passport, that you can work from home in Barbados for 12 months. They're going to make that easy for you. And I'm like, that's a trailblazing thing to do. And
as winter chips in, I'm starting to think I might have to rent a room in an island house.
Exactly, but
this jumper not gonna work.
Barbados is a nation that's always led the way in some way, shape or form. And I said earlier, they punch above their weight. My vision is that they will continue to do that, and do that from a place and a space where everyone who is in the island does exactly what Mia Motley also said in one of her interviews. I think it was with the CBC Australia, that she, and it's already been mentioned here as well, that you could grow up going, I could be the head of state. I can do that, I can aspire to that. And for me, that is part of the vision that I would hold. And I'm just saying, it's not that I'm anti, I'm just saying do it with due process, so you don't make a hash of the opportunity. Do it well, do it excellently, so that it is an unparalleled success, and it lays out the blueprint for all of the other Caribbean islands who go, we want to follow suit. So that would be where I would see and how I would like to see this unfolding.
Mr. Bishop, you turn your head away. What's your comment, sir?
Sorry. I was momentarily distracted. I apologize, but I was turning my ear to it, so I was listening intently. My comment. Okay, I'll do this. I'll keep it brief. I won't shout, and I won't even speak in Bajan.
You're allowed to speak in Bajan on this show today.
Yeah, I could.
Right now, for the first time, Bajan's outnumber Yardis, so go right ahead, sir. Feel free.
I could talk so. Okay. I think in the chat I was described as being an idealist. I've seen nothing wrong with being an idealist. It's much the same as when people refer to some of us or people who want to be free as I've lost my thread of thought. The point I wanted to make is this. This chat is meant to be about should we or should we not remove the Queen of Head of State, right? I have heard several reasons for why we should. I have heard nothing whatsoever about why we should not. The closest we've come to it has been, why should we discuss that when there are other important things that can be discussed? The point has been made several times that there's nothing to stop us from doing so and continuing to discuss those important things. And again, there is absolutely no value to keeping the Queen as our head of state. There is none. If there is, I demand that someone suggest what it is. Now, you have an issue, Paul, with the fact that there's a part of Jamaica called Little England. Well, I've lived the whole of my life with people referring to Barbados as Little England. It's time for us to shed that. We have to shed that. We are not Little Englanders. If people understood the history, and I am going to be brief, said I would. So if people understood the history of the Caribbean, they would see clearly why it is that each individual island developed in a particular way, which is why I get so angry when we spend so much of our time being critical of other islands and of each other, because we do not understand this divide and rule principle at all. If we did so, you would not, during my childhood, have Bajans and Trinis and Jamaicans and everybody cursing each other out because of their perceived relative weaknesses, because we've been manipulated in that way. It's time for us to stop all of that. And one of the best ways of stopping that is to get rid of one of the principal reasons for that. We do not need Queen Elizabeth as our head of state. Nobody has yet, I will repeat for the last time, nobody has yet demonstrated any value whatsoever for her to continue to be our head of monarch. It is ludicrous that we in the Caribbean cannot say, or in England, we're not happy with the with the ruling that the court made. You know what we're going to do? We're going to go and appeal to Trinidad. We're going to go and appeal to Jamaica or Barbados or St. Vincent. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. We have to listen to some Marcus Garvey and Adam. You play some Gabby there and with the people that man. Me and you are good friends, you know. But you know, we need to have a talk, my brother. Okay.
We certainly do. I'm going to talk to you right now if Paul allows
Hold on.
me.
Let me quickly go to Anthony Yearwood. He's had his hand up very patiently. Anthony, quickly.
Right. I can't be that quick, but first of all, let me say thank you for all the contributions that people have made. Barbados has been through all the processes that you, Alan, think that they should still go through. Barbados has risen up from a very low economic base to a country now which is considered to be a middle-income country, and in some factors, some quotes, actually Barbados is the 53rd richest country in the world. Now, Barbados has everything in place to become a republic. It is not something new. People have been asking for this for quite a while. Now Barbados is in a position, they have a government which is unanimously elected. There is no opposition apart from the two people that the Prime Minister has allowed to, is co-opted into her government, if you like. The people of Barbados have already spoken. They have given complete and total confidence in their Prime Minister, Prime Minister Mia Mottley. Now, I'm not going to go back over the colonial past. That is past. But as we go forward as a nation of Barbados, some of the things that you have referred to, Kevin, will disappear. Barbados is proud of its history, much of its history, but there are things that they're not proud of. And I've spoken to Barbadians about this, and people living in Barbados, and I'm a Barbadian myself, but I don't live there. They will disappear. But what is now the important issue is for Barbados to be able to go to the Commonwealth leaders' meetings as a republic. The Queen serves no purpose in Barbados, apart from maybe giving somebody like the anniversary of their 100th birthday, a birthday card, which, by the way, many Bajans get. And the reason they get that is because Barbados took a bold step. When Arab Barrow became Prime Minister, he made a very bold step. First of all, education. Secondly, healthcare, universal healthcare, a system where people are able to receive payments when they can't work. Barbados has everything in place that any of the other so-called rich countries have. The only thing they don't have is the head of state, which is born and bred in their country. Now, Barbados needs that. They need that to be able to stand head and shoulders with anybody else. Now, if other countries feel that they don't have the infrastructure to be able to do that, that is their responsibility. Barbados is not out there waving the flag, trying to lead anybody. Mia Mottley has just finished her term as head of the CARICOM. Well, she's now dedicated to Barbados. We need to have that republic status. As I've said, 53 countries, 31 republics. Some of those republics don't have the financial stability that Barbados has. And if you listen to the throne speech, the text of it included a comment by the Governor General, the Queen's representative, quoting Barbados as being the best black run republic in the world. I would have struck that out because Barbados does not need to boast itself up. They shouldn't do. They should be proud of what they've achieved. They should go forward and take the next step. And the next step is republic status. How they decide on how they run their country as a republic, that's up to Barbados. I just hope that I'll be in a position to be there to vote for that. We don't need a referendum on that issue. The Prime Minister's already said she's going to hold a referendum on another issue, which is another issue that is a stumbling block in the government of Barbados, and she's going to deal with that one. Listen to her talk. Can you imagine a more fantastic head of state?
We Jamaicans certainly can't.
Well,
and I know my Jamaica card gonna get bun up after this, but we wish he would just hop over to Jamaica for a couple of years.
Well, you never know. Maybe one day she'll have the confidence to actually run for the president of CARICOM if it becomes one complete status. Can you imagine that? A pan-Caribbean country, one state. Oh, by the way, they tried that once before, didn't we?
Didn't quite work out. Alan, it is now 15:22.
And have half an hour.
I don't have half an hour, unfortunately.
I know.
Look,
I know.
It's been a wonderful conversation and a passionate one. And, you know, I really appreciate the passion that we have for our countries, you know, and as somebody said, otherwise, this sort of divisiveness, this separation between the islands is pointless. You know, the little saying goes, just a different stop on the boat. Yeah. So I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is the progression and the movement of our people, who ultimately we are all Africans. And that's the progression and movement. We are where we are now. Let's make the best of it. Let's move our islands across and strengthen them. I believe that the whole concept of CARICOM as a leading force is appropriate and right. I think it's definitely a direction we should be going. But I'm going to ask you all in the same order you introduce yourselves to wrap up with your closing statements. Do not make me have a cutting off, because I will. Yep. Alan, I'll start with you.
All right. Okay. I'll try and make it brief. Look, I could sit here and make an argument for becoming a republic quite easily because it is what I want. But I do not think that is the point. What I don't want is a small minority of us who have a very clear vision about what a republic should mean, telling the majority of people, this is what you should accept. So my argument has been totally about process. And I have clearly said in no uncertain way that I am pro-republic. What I am not pro is a small minority of people deciding that this is what is best for everybody. For me, it is far better to educate everybody to understand why it is best. Else, we're doing exactly what the colonials did. A small minority of white people come into the Caribbean and decide how the Caribbean will operate. I cannot sit here and replicate that process. And that is what I'm seeing happening. A small minority of people with the power to decide what the rest of us will do intend to impose that on the rest of us. And I will resist that with every part of my body, soul, and mind. Let us have a referendum. But before we do that, let us educate the people as to why becoming a republic is best for Barbados. So anybody who says that Alan Springer is not pro-Republic is totally off track. Alan Springer is pro taking the rest of the country with us and being sure that that is what we are doing. So I will end on that.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to go to the rose among the thorns. Marilyn, your closing statements, please.
Prime Minister Mia Mottley does not strike me as a woman. And Anthony Yearwood, you might need to turn your microphone off. Mia Mottley does not strike me as a woman who would make a decision and not have a plan to follow that decision through. So what I'm hoping we're now going to see is the plan, the actions, the statements, the what it means, the clarification. I'm hoping we're now going to see all of that laid out. And because I'm assuming we just saw the tip of the iceberg, which is the statement, which, you know, Sir Garfield Sobers, for example, said he was shocked and it took him by surprise to hear that statement made. And I'm hoping that the reason that it seemed to come from left field, even though it's been a much longer conversation for the last 22 years, or even the last, 54 years, depending on how you look at it, I hope what we now see is the process laid out, so we can see exactly what it means, exactly what the island needs to do to maintain its status and continue to grow for the benefit of all of the hard work that every single Bajan on the island has put into bringing it to the status that Barbados now holds. And the figures that I saw also about the 156th richest country and the richest country in the Caribbean, I want that to continue, just with due process, good strategy, good planning. So now I'm watching Prime Minister Mia Mottley, and I'm just waiting for the plan that we haven't yet seen, because we're not in government. Why would we see everything that they're working on behind the scenes? I would like to think that's all being done behind the scenes, and we are going to see the plan for moving forwards so that Barbados continues to grow, it continues to excel, and it continues to maintain the place that it has worked so hard to achieve as being an exemplar of the Caribbean islands.
Thank you, Marilyn. And last, certainly not least, Dr. Kevin Brown.
Thank you, Paul. Well, first of all, it's been a pleasure to be on this panel to discuss what I think is a very important topic. For me, Paul, it's quite clear time come, and it's time for the Queen to be retired as head of state. And this isn't a sort of personal situation in terms of us having a personal problem with the Queen. It's just a fundamental change in how we govern our countries, and as sovereign states we should have our own head of state. So I think it's quite clear that we need to do this. What I would say, though, as much as I respect Mia Mottley, I will believe it when it's been done, because unfortunately in Jamaica many a politician have promised the same and have not delivered, including the current government, who've promised again. It's a rolling can that we keep down the road. So I hope Barbados will perhaps put Jamaica to shame and shame Jamaica into also following your lead, because you have already removed the Privy Council as your final court of appeal. Barbados has adopted the Caribbean Court of Justice, and maybe again Barbados is going to put Jamaica, and Jamaica tends to think that we're the leaders in the Caribbean, but maybe Barbados, at least in terms of governance, might be leading us there. So I wish Barbados well in this initiative, and I hope that Jamaica will also follow the same path. And my final thing is that, there's no price you can put on freedom. So let us not be afraid, my friends, but let us go forward seeking to be free and to walk amongst men and women as equals on this planet. And the other thing as well, Paul, that you didn't get to touch on is this whole narrative now where America is now saying that Barbados is being influenced by China. I hope that we will not be distracted by these comments, because we have been talking about removing the Queen before China came along in terms of their current investment in the Caribbean. So but as you can see, there are other external geopolitical forces that we should not allow to influence our path to freedom. Thank you.
Look, it's one hell of a conversation, and the only unfortunate consequence is that we don't have time to delve into all the facets that I've certainly thought about. But before we go, I just want to touch on one point which Kevin made, and that's a point about how the US is viewing the actions of China in the Caribbean. Make no mistake, Boris Johnson is doing the same. An article in The Guardian covers the thoughts of Boris Johnson and the way he looks at what they call the rise of the dragon in the Caribbean. And I think it's quite hypocritically ironic that the country that had the largest empire in the world is now afraid of the movements of the likes of China and would like to tell us, would like to dictate to us, would like to continue to dictate to us exactly how we should run our affairs. I can't believe that Boris Johnson has actually instructed his government and the ambassadors to look into how China is operating, as if he is still some sort of a kindly father. And for me, that really cements the reasoning behind removing the link to Britain. They have not served us well. Colonialism was a means to exploit the various countries that they call colonies. Even when they gave us quote unquote independence, they left the structures and infrastructure in place to continue that rape. And they have simply continued to bleed us dry. And now with Brexit, when they will find themselves in a bit of a pickle, they will try to assert themselves back into the countries of the Caribbean, Africa, the Indian continent, just the same. But we must not allow that to happen any more than we should allow China to become the second wave of colonialists in our countries. Guys, it's been absolutely fantastic. And I want to say a big thank you to Alan. Alan is all the way in Barbados, and he made a point of how sunny it was in Barbados. And since I'm in my jumper, I didn't appreciate it, Alan, let's be clear. Yeah. Kevin, thank you so much for your passion. Marilyn, again, thank you so much for your insight. And all the people who joined us on Zoom and on Facebook, thank you so much for joining the show. I will not be having a show next week, Sunday rather. It's the first time since lockdown that I won't be having a show on Sunday. That's because I'm going on holiday. No, I'm not going to Jamaica, but I'll be on holiday. So there'll be no show next week. There'll be a show the week after, which is the 11th of October. So I look forward to you guys joining me there. Look, this has been Paul Lawrence with People Talk. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Sunday afternoon.